Here's where it gets interesting. Most people think a ghost town just fades away. Slowly. Over years. But that's not what happened here. Some of these towns didn't fade. They dropped off a cliff. Once you know why, you'll never look at an old mining town the same way again. If you get this wrong, you walk past these places and think, just an old ruin. But you're missing the real story. It's a story about people. Real families, real jobs, real loss. Get the history wrong, and you erase the people who lived it. So here's a better question to ask. Don't ask, is this town haunted? Ask this instead. What happened here fast enough to empty it out? That one question unlocks almost every mining ghost town in this country. Let me show you what I mean. Picture a normal town, a pub, a school, a church, families walking to work every morning. Now picture a mine sitting right in the middle. It's like the heart of the town. Everything depends on that mine beating. Now picture that heart stopping, not slowing down, stopping. That's what a mine collapse does. It's not a slow fade, it's a heart attack. I visited a site like this years ago. An old fence line, half a chimney, nothing else. No signage, no warning. Just silence where a school bell used to ring. That silence told me more than any ghost story ever could. It's the kind of quiet that makes you lower your voice without even thinking about it, out of respect for whatever happened there. I remember standing there for a long time, just looking at the ground, trying to picture where the main street used to run. There was nothing left to mark it, no plaque, no sign, just grass, and a few old bricks scattered where a building once stood. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Some of these towns lost dozens of people in a single incident, not over years, in one day. That's not folklore, that's a coroner's report. Think about that for a second. One day this town has a school full of kids, a pub full of workers, a church with a full congregation. The next day, half the men in town are gone. That's not a slow decline, that's a town cut in half overnight. So what does the haunted reputation really come from? It's not coming from nowhere. It's coming from real trauma that never got told properly. People felt something was wrong in these places. Something was wrong. They just didn't have the paperwork. Now you do. A mining disaster doesn't just kill people. It kills a town's whole future in one afternoon. A mine failed. People died. The town couldn't recover fast enough. And here's something most people never think about. Even the towns that survived a disaster rarely came back the way they were. The people who stayed carried that day with them for the rest of their lives. That's not superstition. That's grief passed down. Want to spot one yourself? Look for towns that show up strong in one census, then almost empty in the next. That gap is the story. And once you start looking for that pattern, you'll notice it again and again across this country. A booming entry in one record, a near empty one a few years later. Nobody talks about it in the tourist brochures, but it's sitting right there in the archives waiting for anyone bothered enough to check. That's the real detective work behind most of these towns. Not ghost hunting, just reading the numbers properly. But mining towns aren't the only ones that vanish fast. Some towns didn't lose people to an accident at all. They lost them to the land turning against them. That's next. Now let's talk about the towns nobody blew up. Nobody attacked. Nobody dug a disaster into. These towns just ran out of water or ran out of luck with the land. And that's almost stranger than a mining collapse. Why? Because there's no single moment to point to. If you don't know this category, you'll hear a local legend. The town was cursed, and you'll believe it. It sounds more interesting than the truth. But believe the wrong story, and you miss what really destroyed these towns. Usually it's a decision, a human decision, not a curse. So here's your test. Every time you hear the land turned on them, ask one question. What was promised to these people, and did it actually hold up? 9 times out of 10, that's where the real story hides, buried under a much better story about curses and bad luck. Think of it like this. Someone sells you a block of land. They tell you, don't worry, the water will always be there. You build your whole life on that promise. Then one dry season, the promise breaks. That's not a curse, that's a bad business deal, dressed up as folklore 50 years later. Some Australian towns were built around irrigation schemes. These schemes promised water for farming, forever. Investors put up the money, families put up their lives, and for a while it worked. When the water table dropped, families didn't leave in one dramatic night. They left one at a time, over a few hard years, until one day the town just wasn't a town anymore. Picture it happening slowly. First the store closes, then the school loses too many kids to keep the doors open, then the pub. One by one, the buildings that made it a town stop being useful. And nobody ever announces the town is finished. It just quietly stops being one. Here's the twist. The scarier the local legend sounds, the more likely it's hiding something boring and human. A bad deal. A failed scheme. A government report nobody wanted to admit was wrong. The land couldn't support the promise that built these towns. It was a slow collapse, not one single event. Look at the timeline and you'll see it. A slow drain over years, not one fast drop. And that's the pattern worth remembering. Whenever a town's decline sounds too neat, too mysterious, too cursed, it's usually a sign that someone somewhere doesn't want the real boring reason getting out. Chase that boring reason. It's almost always there. Not every town on this list emptied because of the land. Some emptied because of what people did to each other. Those are the towns with the heaviest history of all. This next part needs care. We're not talking legend anymore. We're talking real conflict, real Australian history, from the Colonial-Era. Get this wrong, and it's not just a factual mistake. It's disrespectful to real people. Their history deserves to be told straight, not dressed up for views. So here's the right way to treat it. Treat these sites the way a historian would, not the way a ghost tour guide would. Use the documented record. Use real dates. Use names where they're known. Don't add drama that isn't there. The truth doesn't need decoration. Think of it this way. A ghost story fades if you stop repeating it. A historical record doesn't fade, no matter how uncomfortable it is. These sites carry weight because something real happened. Communities have carried that memory forward, generation after generation, so it wouldn't be forgotten. That's an important difference, and it's worth sitting with for a second. A campfire story gets exaggerated every time it's retold. A community's insistence on remembering a real event works the opposite way. It gets protected, guarded, passed down carefully, because the people telling it know exactly why it matters. In many of these cases, the haunted reputation isn't folklore at all. It's a community's way of refusing to let a real event disappear. Treat it as just a scary story, and you don't just get the history wrong. You erase the reason people kept telling it in the first place. The events at these sites were real, and they mattered. What happened was documented conflict during Australia's colonial settlement period, tied to specific places, specific records. Approach them with the same respect you'd want for your own family's history, told 200 years from now. That's really the whole approach in one sentence. Respect first, facts first, drama never. If you carry that rule into every haunted town story you hear from now on, you'll already be ahead of almost everyone else covering this topic. From here, the list takes a strange turn. The next category isn't about tragedy at all. It's about towns that didn't die. They were simply left behind. Here's a category that surprises almost everyone. Some of the most haunted looking towns in Australia never had a tragic thing happen in them. Nothing. No disaster. No conflict. They just got replaced. Assume every eerie town has a dark secret, and you'll go looking for one that isn't there. You'll either make something up or miss the real, much simpler answer. So here's your solution. Before you assume tragedy, check the infrastructure. A new highway, a moved railway line, a dam that flooded the old town site. 9 times out of 10, that's your answer. Think of it like this. Imagine your street gets replaced by a new one. 3 streets over. Everyone just moves. Nobody dies. Nobody's forced out violently. The town just becomes unnecessary overnight. The buildings stay standing because nobody bothered to tear them down. That's it. That's the whole mystery. Several towns were deliberately relocated when a new dam flooded their original site. The old town sometimes still sits underwater, or half exposed depending on the season, like a photo nobody developed. Some years, when the water drops low enough, you can actually see the old streets again. Fence lines, building foundations, even the odd letterbox posts still standing after all this time. Locals say it's like the town comes back to say hello, then disappears again once the rain returns. These towns are often the most photogenic, most haunted-looking places on the whole list. Why? Because nothing happened there. No tragedy, no violence, no drama at all. And yet they're the ones that unsettle people the most. The eeriness isn't history, it's just abandonment, frozen mid-motion. Your brain fills in the dark story yourself. These towns were abandoned all at once with no dramatic reason. That's what your mind finds unsettling. Infrastructure changes made them pointless, not tragic. Want to spot one yourself? Look for a nearby dam, a rerouted highway, a relocated railway line. That's usually your answer. It's a good reminder, honestly. Not every abandoned place needs a dark secret to be worth talking about. Sometimes the most interesting thing about a town is simply that it was left exactly as it was, frozen in the exact moment it stopped mattering. Every town so far has had a clear, findable explanation, but there's one more category left. This is the one where even the record books admit they don't have every answer. Now for the part where I have to be honest with you. Not everything on this list has a clean answer, and that's rarer than you'd think. Most haunted town videos want every case to feel like a total mystery. Mystery gets clicks. But if I told you all 10 towns were unexplained, I'd be lying to you. Only a couple genuinely have gaps in the record. You need to know which ones and why. So here's the key skill. Learn the difference between unexplained and under-documented. They sound the same. They are not. Think of it like this. A library burns down and you can't find a book anymore. That doesn't mean the story in that book was magic. It just means the story got harder to find. Most unexplained Australian towns are like that missing book. Not a mystery, a paperwork problem. In a small number of cases, local records were genuinely lost. To fire, to flood. Historians today work with incomplete records, or conflicting population numbers, or towns renamed and folded into a different shire. That's a real documented gap, not a ghost story. Think about how easy that is, even today. Councils merge. Paperwork gets boxed up and never unpacked. A town gets renamed, and 20 years later, nobody realizes the new name, and the old town were ever the same place. That's not a mystery. That's just how record keeping works and always has. And here's the biggest realization of the whole video. Even the most mysterious town on this list usually has a boring, bureaucratic reason behind it. A merged council, a lost file, a renamed district. Genuine unsolved history is rare. Most of what gets called unexplained online simply hasn't been looked up yet. These cases feel more mysterious because the paper trail is thinner, not because the history is stranger. Lost records, administrative changes, renamed towns, not anything supernatural. Want to know if something is truly unresolved? Ask if a historian has actually looked, or if it's just never been searched. And honestly, that question applies to almost everything in this video. Before you accept nobody knows, ask who actually looked and how hard. Most mysteries in this country aren't unsolved. They're just unchecked. Here's what I want you to take from all this. Every one of these towns is real. Most are still out there today. 10 towns, 10 different reasons. Mining disasters, failed promises on the land. Real conflict that deserves to be remembered properly. Quiet replacement by a highway or a dam. And a couple of genuine gaps in the record, still waiting for someone to fill them in. Not one ghost, just history. Waiting for someone to actually ask about it. And that's really the point of this whole video. It's easy to hear the word haunted and switch your brain off. You expect a spooky story, you get a spooky story, and you move on to the next video. But every single town on this list rewards you for staying curious a little longer than that. Behind every one of these reputations is a real event, a real decision, or a real gap in the paperwork. None of it needed a ghost to make it worth telling. If anything, the true version is usually more interesting than the scary one, because it actually happened to real people, in real places, not that long ago. So here's what to do next. Look up the town closest to you. Check if it made this list. Then drop it in the comments. I want to know which one surprised you the most. And hit subscribe, because next time we go looking for the ones that didn't make the cut.